From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
President Biden sinks to new lows in presidential approval in a new ABC Washington Post poll. And most dismaying in the White House, I'm sure, is the result that says that the majority of the American people don't think the president now is up to the job, not capable of doing it in terms of his capacities for the job. And head-to-head polling, Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump both now beating Joe Biden in presidential head-to-head polls. Plus, President Biden is set to meet with the congressional leaders at the White House Tuesday to talk about the looming deadline to raise the debt ceiling. Will they make any progress, or are we headed toward brinksmanship that risks default? Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Paul Gigot with the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal. I'm here with Kate Batchelder-Odell and the estimable one, Kyle Peterson. Not to say that you're not estimable, Kate, but sometimes I like to have fun with Kyle, as he does with me. Let's talk about this polling, Kyle, with President Biden. One poll is not obviously definitive. It's a moment in time, as the cliche has it. But the striking thing is almost less his approval rating, that so many Americans don't think he's capable of doing the job of the presidency, and yet he's running now for what would be an additional 4 years, for 6 more years, essentially, where his capacities aren't going to get any better.
Yeah, the thing that the president often says when he is asked about his age is he says, just watch me. And the thesis seems to be that he is so energetic and so with it that anybody who's paying attention should know that he is obviously up to the job. But the American people have been watching him, and in this poll, asked if Biden has the mental sharpness it takes to serve effectively as president, 32% say yes, and 63% say no. And that has got to be an alarming number if you're in the White House or if you're a Democrat who's not in the White House. I think this is an underrated dynamic, and it has the potential to get much worse as we get toward 2024, because by then Biden will be a year older. And who knows how his health will be at that point. But you look at this poll and it shows both Donald Trump beating Biden and Ron DeSantis beating Biden. And so the question I think for me is if the polls keep trending in this direction, at what point is there a break in the Democratic Party, this firewall that Biden is the guy and he's the only guy? And either he has to think twice about getting in for re-election, or another candidate, somebody like Gavin Newsom, somebody like Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, thinks that there's a real opportunity here. And if somebody else doesn't challenge the president in a primary, you may end up paving the way for a second Trump term.
So you decided to go up to DEFCON 4 there with the implications of that, Kyle, a second Donald Trump term. I just find it extraordinary that more than 60% of the American public says he does not have the mental acuity to do the job now, okay? And yet, I mean, they must have had some indication of this in White House polling. It can't have fallen off the cliff. I guess it's only been a month since the president decided he'd run for re-election. This really does have to be something of a jolt to Democrats and give them pause about whether their cordon sanitaire around the president is the proper strategy here. They're going to have to tough this out for another 17, 18 months before the election.
Yeah, Paul, I think it should be a wake-up call. I'm not sure that it will, because I think this has been pretty obvious to the public for some time. If you watch the speeches he gives, I always think of the one when the White House was ordering to shoot down unidentified objects several months ago. Biden talked for about 8 minutes and shuffled off. The public really can see what Democrats have struggled to see here, which is that Biden appears to struggle to be up to the task. I'd make a couple more quick points about this poll that really strike me. The first one being that I think Democrats are really playing with fire by trying to make Trump the nominee again. I think they're doing that assuming there's no way that he could ever win again. And this poll suggests that they should have some pause at stoking another Trump nomination. The second quick point is just that this poll also said that gave Trump an advantage on handling the economy over Biden by 54 to 36. And I think that shows that if any Republican could really get back to those pocketbook issues. Trump's economic policies were a lot of traditional ideas like tax reform. There's another real vulnerability there to exploit for a good Republican candidate.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Republicans, of course, have focused so much on the culture war issues in recent months, and leading up to the 2022 election didn't turn out so well. But that number head-to-head on Trump versus Biden on the economy is really, really striking. And to the extent that the economy here, if we have a recession, even a relatively mild one, with continuing inflation, even if inflation moderates, you kind of end up with a stagflation economy, which doesn't have real income gains. So people aren't going to feel better about themselves, even if they don't lose their jobs. They're not going to feel like they're gaining in terms of the standard of living. If that happens, you could end up with the economy being a significant issue that hurts the Democrats. And of course, the White House is doing everything it can to try to portray the economy as fantastic. But this poll number really should give pause to that strategy. Kyle, how does this affect the Republican race to the extent it does? I guess it empowers Trump to claim that he can win this election, and that'll undermine, I suppose, some of the arguments that, well, what I have thought, which is that he'll have a very hard time winning.
Yeah, that's true, though it also may open up the field some because there may be Republican voters who think that Trump is the only guy who can beat an incumbent president, Joe Biden. We want to see this rematch, and he's the prosecutor who can take it to the guy in the Oval Office. And I wonder if there might be a countervailing trend among some Republican voters to think, wait a second, if Joe Biden is really as weak of an incumbent as we think it is, as this polling suggests, then that means that we can have our pick of the litter and we can look at who's up on the Republican debate stage and make our decision based on who we like best and who we think is putting forth an optimistic view of the future and the kind of policies that we want, and trust that that person can have the ability to beat Joe Biden because Joe Biden is flagging here and voters seem to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the White House has to hope that there's a pretty good bounce back in the economy, that there's no foreign policy setback, that Ukraine's offensive gains ground and there's a settlement in the Russia-Ukraine war, and that Biden performs better. I mean, I think that's part of the problem here. He's just got to perform better, and I'm not sure that he's capable of it, which seems to be the essence of what the American public thinks. We had a Democratic governor in to see us on Friday. I won't say who it was, but the governor made the observation that if the president didn't run, that, of course, Kamala Harris would be the immediate frontrunner, but talked about the fact that some of these governors would also run and that J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, Kate, could start out with $200 million right in the bank and get a big head start.
Yeah, Paul, it's just a question of whether the Democrats are going to see that that is a wise course of action at this point. I mean, I think it reinforces your point about the mistake that it was for Biden to pick Kamala Harris as his running mate because she was a weak candidate who flamed out fast in the primaries, and she's been a largely weak vice president. Her portfolio overseeing the border has not gone particularly well, and there's not really a record to point to there. And now they're stuck with a really weak vice presidential nominee as well. And we've talked about this here before, but Republicans would, I think, be wise to point out that if you do vote for Biden again this time around, you're essentially voting for President Kamala Harris, because that may be who you end up with. So I think that has become a unique vulnerability for them.
Just to Kyle's point about the fact that this kind of polling could open up the Republican field, the contrast in age would seem to play, to me, to the benefit of a younger Republican candidate, Kyle. If you nominate Donald Trump, he would be 78 when he took the inauguration for a second term, finishing when he's 82. I mean, he has more energy, obviously, than Biden. He hasn't seemed to suffered any slowdown mentally, for what that's worth. But the actuarial tables are still not in your favor for high performance when you get to be that age. So I think the contrast between Biden at his age, 82, when he takes office and campaigns, versus 44-year-old Ron DeSantis would be greater.
Yeah, it definitely would. I mean, think back to Hillary Clinton's TV ad. There's a phone ringing in the White House, and it's 3 a.m., and you and your children are sleeping. Who do you want to answer that phone call? And I had a friend the other day who said, are we sure that President Biden is ready to answer a 3 p.m. phone call? And certainly if it's a Biden versus Trump matchup, you have a little bit of that on both sides. And I think there would be a huge benefit to the GOP in nominating somebody of a different generation. Politically, you've seen that be successful in the past. The paradigmatic example might be Bill Clinton defeating George H.W. Bush, handing off the reins of power to the next generation. Well, now we've gone back to that previous generation here, and certainly you could see a replay of that kind of political dynamic if you have a young, energetic candidate get the Republican nomination here.